How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, plus delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and bracing with a tang and tingle unmatched by any other beverage. Enjoy an ice-cold Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bop and a movie commentary track. Enjoy.
Don't try nothing fancy. Your situation is putting out hopeless.
Damn, we're in a tight spot.
No masturbating. Not while we're recording.
I mean, wow. There are ways of silently jerking. I'm just gonna abandon
what a weird thing
what I was about to say.
Not if you're doing it right, though.
Look, as long as it produces a result, I don't care if it's right or wrong.
And there's no wrong way to jerk off.
I mean,
yeah, there is. Have you ever used sandpaper?
Also,
that's the right way for some people.
Also, Keith Carradine, died from a way. So there is definitely a wrong way.
That was David Carradine.
And there was a woman there.
Yeah, true.
And he died gloriously. He died historic on the Fury Road.
Damn right. I want to die that way. And the way I'm going, I might.
God help me. I really wish we could incorporate this as the start of the episode.
I'm all for it.
I mean, the recorder's on, so.
They were on. I don't know. That seems like a horrible way to introduce. Fuck it.
Have you ever listened to this
prestige, a prestige Coen Brothers movie.
Yes, exactly. And on that note, hello everyone and welcome to Box Office Pulp. I'm your host, Cody, and I'm not ashamed to have my name attached to this fine show unless someone from work hears it and I get fired. Anyways, joining me today, my very own Soggy-Bottom boys, James Lewis.
Hey.
MB.
They've been turned into darn horny toads.
Yeah, it's pretty close. And Mike Napier.
Dapper Dan. I got nothing.
I don't want any goddamn fop.
You're Dapper Dan, man.
Dapper Dan, man. And if you can't tell from these incessant quotes, we're actually covering, we're doing a commentary for my favorite movie of all time.
A bop in a movie.
Kung Pao.
Oh, I wish.
Right, wouldn't that be great? That'd just be us saying the lines for an hour and a half. That's
Can we do that
ever
next?
No, we're not doing Kung Pao, although we wish we were. We're doing an equally fantastic... That seems wrong. Equally fantastic. Like they're on the same level.
I mean, they're practically the same movie.
I'm going to get death threats from the Coen Brothers, which is actually really cool. I'm excited about that.
Oh, I'd get framed.
I certainly would. We are doing the Coen Brothers' Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Which is about equally as good as Kung Pao.
Kung Pao, Enter the Fist.
Enter the Fist. It's the full title, you're right. Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Pretty much the same movie.
I like how for James, Kung Pao, Enter the Fist is his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze.
I mean, there's nothing stating that Oh Brother isn't a sequel taking place in the same universe as Kung Pao.
I mean, he's right. Continuity confirmed.
Before I get too deep in this rabbit hole, because it's just going to devolve into us saying stuff like tiger, birdie for 3 hours, let's get back to the movie at hand. Kung Pao some other day. We eventually will enter the fist, but not today. No, that doesn't come out right, does it?
Cody, do you want one of us to take over? Because
No. Leave me out to dry.
I like how that dragged on in such a horrible way. I just got up and walked away for a minute.
Good. That's probably for the best. Anyways,
Cody, who elected you as the brains of this organization?
Now, MB, he is bona fide.
He is not bona fide. He was hit by a train.
I'm a suitor.
Wow, we just don't even need to actually watch the movie. We can just quote it the entire night, which
This is
I'm
pretty good.
technically for.
I think MB just watched this for like the first time, so that's pretty good.
Actually, I just literally watched this like a few hours ago for the first time. I had seen parts of it, mostly towards the beginning and end, but this was the first.
Does it make a lot more sense now? Like, do you?
I'm actually going to make a pretty bold proclamation for someone who hosts or co-hosts a movie podcast. This was the first Coen Brothers movie I've sat through the entirety of. Not out of, like, any hatred or anything like that, but, like, I've just never really seen one of their movies until this.
The Big Lebowski?
Oh, yeah, Big Lebowski. I forgot about that one. Okay,
Fargo?
No, I've never seen Fargo. I've seen the show. I've been
slowly introducing MB to Fargo over the past few months.
I've never seen, like, No Country for Old Men. I've never seen, like, the remake that they did of,
True
Grit.
Grit?
Yeah, True Grit.
MB hasn't seen shit, folks.
Yeah.
To be fair, the True Grit remake's not even a remake. It's a readaptation of an existing novel.
Yeah.
So they just took it in a less John Wayne direction and more of a Jeff Bridges direction.
I mean, that's semantics. The point is,
because my filing system really depends on this distinction.
Look.
Because I mark if a movie's a remake or if it's a spin-off, sequel, I don't have room for readaptions. Otherwise, I'd have to list like every goddamn Dracula movie that's ever been made and list it after, the 1930 Browning Dracula. I can't do it.
Well, technically, you would have to list that one after Nosferatu, since that's technically a Dracula movie.
By law. Yeah.
Now, the point of all this is that I am severely uncultural as far as movies go. I do not.
You're very unbonafide.
Yeah, I'm very unbonafide. But this was the first time I've really sat through a Coen Brothers movie, aside from The Big Lebowski, apparently, because I forgot that was directed by them. And
Inside Llewellyn Davis?
No.
A Serious Man?
No.
Burn After Reading.
Cody.
I feel like the frogs are really helping with this, by the way.
I feel like the audience tuned out 10 minutes ago.
You're right. Okay, fuck. Okay. So, back on track. Come back to us, audience. All right, there. Right there. Sit. We love you so much. You're doing so good. We're all going to play the movie. While it's playing, we're going to talk over it. Pretty basic. You can follow along if you want to. If not, you can listen to our voices. It's up to you, audience. You do you, but mostly listen to us.
I love how Cody explains how commentaries work, like he's Starman.
I have one job to do, all right? I'm going to do it.
And you do it well.
So, does everyone have their movies queued up? I'm currently playing the Blu-ray version of it. I'm not sure if that makes any difference time-wise to any DVD editions. I don't believe there's any director's cuts out there, or like unrated cuts, or Zack Snyder unlimited extreme 30-minute longer cuts.
I would buy that for this movie in a heartbeat.
Oh, for sure.
Even more Dapper Dan.
30 extra minutes of them discussing Dapper Dan.
Dapper Dan, man.
How did you know that name?
That's not the right Batman. That's not the right Batman.
The devil also uses Dapper Dan.
Edit points. What is everybody's?
You listen through all the edit points?
Yes. Yeah. That's why they're edit points.
Yeah,
I just
edit them.
Cody, this
I
is
assume
how
when you get to an edit
works.
point, you just stop there, like you says edit point. Okay, you cut that bit out. And then when you hear, like, edit point again, then you...
But he has to listen
I have to listen to it to hear for the next edit point.
That's why you do the claps. Then you see the audio spikes.
Well, also, he has free will.
Did you hear me do claps?
No, but that was your mistake.
What?
There should be claps to make the job easier. There should be claps.
Cody!
I agree, but...
Okay. We're in a tight spot. We're in a tight spot. Let's get back to the commentary.
Happy!
No, because now you're screaming happy when we're supposed to be getting back to the commentary. What if we did something different? Like, what if it was a high-pitched, like, and then... No? Okay. I just wanted an excuse to play with that some more.
Please don't do that during the commentary.
No, I won't.
Put the vibrophone away.
I've turned it off. I can't
and
really
lightsabers.
Yeah, no lightsabers.
They're over my bed. I would have to get up and walk over to my bed and take them down.
They're there just in case you get intruders in your house in the middle of the night.
Come at me, bro.
That's what I keep the Nerf guns for. We're getting off topic here. We should do a show just about us trying to put on a show. I think we would have hours and hours of entertainment.
Okay, let's get back into it. Come on.
Right. Edit point. So, is everyone ready?
Ready.
Ready. Does everyone have the remotes primed? We're all at the 0000 mark on your DVD or Blu-ray player. If it has a display, I'm hoping it has a display.
If not, you're in shit luck.
Oh, this is going to be miserable for you. So when we hit play, the Touchstone logo is going to come up. If you don't see the Touchstone logo, you might have put in the wrong movie. That's okay, it happens. You can rewind the podcast and just sync it all up. I believe in you.
Or you can listen to this like during Flash Gordon or whatever you're watching.
And see if it syncs up.
It's one of those deals like The Wizard of Oz and The Dark Side of the Moon. You have to see what our commentaries actually go to. It's rarely the movie we're talking about. It's probably Chud. I'm just going to give you a cheat. It's probably Chud.
Or Scream.
It could be that too.
Most likely Chud 2.
Bud the Chud.
Bud the Chud.
Can we watch this fucking movie?
Yes. Let's get to it, Joe. We're not flops, we're Dapper Dan men.
Dapper Dan, man. Come on, Soggy-Bottom boys. James, would you like the privilege of counting us down?
I would. 1, 2, 3.
The conversation in the background that cut on during that.
Yeah, that was odd. So for some reason, I only have good memories of the Touchstone Pictures logo, and I think it's just because I watched A Nightmare Before Christmas 1,000 times as a child.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the most nostalgic movie logos.
Touchstone isn't around anymore, right? Like, Disney just dissolved that, correct?
I think you see it pop up on movies every once in a while.
Okay. Because if memory serves, Touchstone used to be, like, the redheaded stepchild of Disney products. Like, if they had a movie they didn't really want to be associated to, they'd just stick it under Touchstone, or if it was, like, an adult thing.
Yeah, especially
Foxatonic.
Yeah. Foxatonic.
It would be in front of stuff like Star Kid. Or like
Star Kid.
So here we go, the start of the Odyssey references, which is interesting because everything I've read online basically says that the Coens have never actually read the Odyssey, but it's one of those things that's so prolific in our society that everyone more or less knows the story. Like, we've all seen a play version of it or had to do like a really crappy Cliff Notes version of it in English class.
So it's kind of like the hero's journey? Like
pretty much,
Wars.
It pretty much became not standard storytelling, but it's been reused structure-wise so often that it's hard not for you to see where the lines of the Odyssey are.
By the way, I do want to say real quick before we leave this moment, the song they're singing right now is actually just them lip-syncing a real recording from a 1930s chain gang.
Gotta go authentic. I always forget there's this opening too, because they kind of do it like a vignette style. Like, they've got this going on, credits are interspersed, and you see the guys running away, but this is almost like its own little separate block that you could easily just chunk out of the movie and it wouldn't really connect all that much.
Well, the way I took it was, and this is just speaking as someone who just literally saw the movie, this, to me, is setting the tone of the movie being weirdly musical.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a big part of the movie. Like, bluegrass specifically plays a huge part into the narrative, into, like, a couple of big moments. Like, this just kind of sets it up as, like, what kind of movie it's going to be.
I love that my subtitles just refer to Big Rock Candy Mountain as whimsical folk music. They didn't bother to type any of the lyrics of the song. They're like, screw it, just whimsical folk music. They'll understand.
But I would say my interpretation of that opening sequence kind of bleeds through the thing I love the most about this movie, which is, "Oh brother, where art thou?" is it kind of works almost like a thesis statement of everything the Coen brothers have strived to do throughout their entire career. Like, the Coen brothers' main signature has always been their blending of disparate tones and different storytelling languages, with varying results. But I think "Oh brother, where art thou" more than anything else is the moment where that all clicks together perfectly. And the three worlds this movie blends together are three mythologies: Greek mythology, the mythology of the Old South, and movie mythology. And we see that all blended together in like a single moment at that beginning, where we get the quote from Homer from the Odyssey. We then blend into, like, from black and white to sepia tones on this image of this musical chain gang, which immediately puts us in the environment of the mythological South. The South that's very dirty and ugly, but is still a much more sanitized version of the real thing. Something that's
it's very romanticized.
And then we immediately cut from that to the old-timey title card of "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And that sets up the three threads that are going to be running through this movie.
Well, also, I would say that you're kind of on point with the idea of the Greek mythology aspect, which is them just hammering into rocks is like, it's kind of like they're, I don't know, I have some sort of like image in my head based on what you're saying of like Zeus hammering down like thunder from Olympus or something like that, or lightning rather. Like, it's a very visceral sort of like imagery.
Stone and Greek mythology are actually closely tied, so I actually see your point there. I actually buy that.
Also,
that idea of, go ahead.
No.
All right. Well, going off that idea of the mythic and how it's combined with everything else, that's one of the best features I find in Coen Brothers movies. Is they're not necessarily one thing, but it's how do you amalgamate like 5 different things and put them together into a new combination that still has facets of the old ones if you look hard enough. One of the things I think of is like The Big Lebowski.
Oh yeah,
has a lot of elements where the narrator is making points that wouldn't be out of place in Shakespeare about like legacy and progeny and all that kind of stuff. But it's done in an old westy kind of tone. But the movie itself is not an old west kind of thing at all. It's if anything, it's like a detective novel. It's a Hard Goodbye kind of thing, like.
But told as a stoner comedy.
Right, like it's filtered through so many different
filter
layers.
through a filter through a filter through a filter.
Right,
resulting in something wholly unique.
Right, and with "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" we have this idea that it's the Odyssey, but it's told by guys who are only aware of the outline of the Odyssey, filtered through a musical, filtered through like a Ma and Pa kettle thing. Like, it's just so many layers distilled before we finally get to something completely different than everything else, but feeling familiar, because it's those elements reinterpreted drastically.
Which is what I love so much about the Coen Brothers' career as a whole, which is, in the world the Coen Brothers live in, all myth is equal. Like, the world of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Is a world where a Cyclops and the Ku Klux Klan can stand shoulder to shoulder as monsters of equal stature. You know, where a wandering blind prophet and a blues musician can both be portals into the spirit world. The characters can walk from a scene from an ancient poem into the ending of Sullivan's Travels.
Speaking of which, we have, not necessarily Sullivan's Travels, but this, which always strikes me as like one of the most mythic parts in the movie, the prophet, the blind prophet, who's also just an old black guy rolling down on a, hand-pedaled train car, which seems very South and very mystic at the same time.
And also just doing a movie thing of being the old blind man,
right?
giving mystic advice.
Well, the handcart's very boat across the river Styx, and Tiresias is dead in the Odyssey when you meet him. So, a little bit of a combination there.
Yeah, it's almost like he's in his own little purgatory.
And I just want to say, there's nothing in this movie to say that he's not dead and he hasn't been transformed into a woman briefly previously.
Deleted scenes.
Tiresias is a strange character in Greek mythology.
They're all strange characters in Greek mythology.
I promise I won't talk about Greek mythology too much.
If we get quiet points, we'll make you do it. But for some reason, I always remember this scene. Like, I'll watch this movie, months will go by, I'll watch it again, and I'm always surprised because I remember it as the prophet disappearing from the handcart at some point and it just driving itself, which is not the case. He's always there. It's not nearly as mythical as I remember it, but I don't know if there's another movie where they do that, but that's just how I always remember it.
It just feels like that should happen.
Right. Maybe it's just this long fade out like that's going on right now where it shows the characters by themselves without that guy.
Quite frankly, I prefer the movie I dreamed.
Like, it works fine the way it is. It's just my note.
I will say, as far as the ties to the Odyssey go, literally the only complaint I've ever had about this movie is I really wish there was a scene at the beginning where after they escape, the boys try to get Everett to thank God for their escape, and he refuses.
That would have been a nice tie at the ending.
No.
That's literally the only touchstone from the only major touchstone from the Odyssey that they kind of miss out on.
They do have, I mean, they do have the scene by the river where he basically mocks religion, so it's tied in, but that's a little ways in. It would make more sense to have it at the beginning, but whatever. I'm no expert.
Also, just going away from, because I know we're going to go deep into like the Odyssey connections and the story connections and all that, and the mythological aspects to the story, and just a lot of stuff that's going on. But can we just stop for a minute and talk about the performances of the three leads?
God,
because I have never seen George Clooney put on a performance like this.
Oh, this is his best role ever.
Oh yeah,
it's fantastic. And Tim Blake Nelson, every scene, he's just making some sort of impossible face.
He steals every scene.
Tim Blake Nelson is the ray of light in every scene that he's in. It's weird. Like, he puts on the single most positive performance I've ever seen in a movie like this. And John Turturro, like, he's almost completely transformed from what he usually does.
On the making of featurette, I love the quote from the Coens. We gave him these teeth, and apparently he really liked the teeth. I think he got the entire character from the fake teeth. If you watch the movie, he's constantly showing those teeth. I think that was it. Like, he got the teeth and he understood the character. The character are the teeth. So yeah, all three of them just, God, absolutely phenomenal. And the supporting characters too. Anytime you have John Goodman in a movie, you're probably just writing a check for like an Oscar. Like, it's just gonna happen. Yeah.
John Goodman, not only that, but in a very surprisingly limited role that is memorable in a way that you wouldn't expect. Like, he only gets really like 3 scenes, but he makes the most of them, and he gets a lot to do in them.
Or just the politicians themselves too, just such overblown, gigantic characters, but it works so well.
Well, again, like,
is you is or is you ain't my constituency.
Well, again, that's just messing with the mythology of the South, of the most American mythology, which is just as valid as Greek mythology. Also, I find this kind of fascinating. You Are My Sunshine, playing right there, is sometimes falsely attributed to the real-life Pappy O'Daniel. But was actually, I believe, a campaign song by a unrelated Southern politician. But I do love how that song is forever linked to the mythological Southern politician. And that's why it's included in this.
Also of interest, like, You Are My Sunshine, if you really pay attention to it, it's kind of a depressing song.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Don't Take My Sunshine Away is basically, like the guy's remembering a great love he once had, and it's gone. Yeah. The sunshine has left him. And Big Rock Candy Mountain, also a horrible song, basically about, like, a hobo trying to convince a kid to run off so he can do who knows what to this child. Like, a lot of these songs on the surface seem really cheery and jaunty and, like a good time. And when you dig into them, you just realize they're made from a place of suffering and just kind of made as a way to pave over that.
It's definitely got, like, 2 conflicting tones about it within the music. I mean, A Man of Constant Sorrow is literally the title of the film's main theme, and it's, I would say probably, like, if I had a favorite bluegrass song, that would definitely be it, because I'm not general. Was somebody shooting at someone for real?
They got MB. They got MB.
My TV was up a little loud. I apologize.
But as someone who's generally not a fan of bluegrass, I found myself actually really endeared to the use of it in this movie.
Oh, the soundtrack to this movie had a lengthy life as just an album.
Yeah, I remember...
That's just a great fucking country album.
It is. It was like one of the main things I remember. Like growing up, I think we saw the movie. I don't remember, but we had the soundtrack, and my parents would play it like every day at dinner. So that was probably one of the reasons why I love this movie so much, because it's just constantly ingrained in my childhood memories of just hearing the soundtrack playing. But oh man, T-Bone, just the musical producer for this film.
Oh yeah, T-Bone Burnett, who did the score for True Detective, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, God, every time he works with the Coens, he produces something amazing. Like, he also worked with them for Inside Llewellyn Davis, and the cues he finds for these films really make them. They'd be good movies without him, but with him, they're absolutely phenomenal. His touch just sells the entire thing perfectly.
He is one of the unsung geniuses out there.
Going into another thing that I kind of have absorbed through like sort of cultural metamorphosis or cultural osmosis about the Coens is that they're really big on absurdity.
Oh yeah.
Like that seems to be like kind of the running thing is that they're really fond of having absurd situations, just almost like cartoonish situations just happen in the middle of a very serious setup or...
Well, the Coens have a very interesting dichotomy with their movies, and you see this especially in their darker material like Blood Simple and Fargo and No Country for Old Men, and that's the horrible and the slapstick living side by side. The idea that something that's very scary can also be really silly, but that's not comforting, that's actually kind of horrifying.
It's like clowns.
Yes. I mean, you see that very
silly,
much.
but they're actually horrifying. It's actually, I think, why people don't get into them.
Yeah, you see that very much in Fargo specifically, which is a comedy by virtue of the fact that it's really over the top and everyone has a Midwestern accent. But there's not a single joke in that movie. It's just... I think that's what makes the Coen Brothers films latch onto you long after you've seen them, is that notion that really terrifying notion that the most horrible things in life are also ludicrous.
Going off of that, if I can interrupt for just a second, the idea of the dichotomy, the other big split you see in like every Coen Brother movie is this discussion between high and low art. Like in The Big Lebowski, we have that moment where they see the really terrible one-man play, but later on is contrasted by the dude's dreams, which is like very big and Wagner and operatic about him bowling. And it's a weird presentation of a low idea, low art, but done in an operatic high art style. And there seems to be this blending where I'm not sure if they're poking fun at how pretentious things can be, or if they're trying to turn their nose up at things that are low class, that are trying to present themselves as more important than they are.
I would not say so. I would say that the Coen Brothers, if they had a moral through line through their movies in any way, it's the celebration of simplicity. You see that very much in Fargo. Just a movie that's all about being content with the simple things in life.
But it's confusing too, because we're also made to kind of laugh at these simple thing characters. Like, in the end, the presented moral is, yes, this is how it should be, because they're simple people without ambitious plans. You know, Marge Gunderson isn't murdered by her inept husband. But the truth of the movie is it is kind of presenting these characters as being funny.
Well, I think you can also say something as, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you can laugh at somebody and still consider them, like, to be a positive, or consider them to be adept or something like that. Like,
but if you look at a character like Everett, he's presented like the other ones. He's more along the simple lines. He's full of himself, though, and his vocabulary is just as stuffed as possible. Every word, it's like he had to research the thesaurus beforehand to find a better word to stick in his conversational tones, like I just did. So it almost feels like they're making fun of that type of character in all their movies. He's, in the end, lovable, but you also feel like he has every problem that's coming to him.
Well,
It's deserved in a way.
Like Coens like to make fun of pomposity, of trying to make yourself more than what you actually are, in a way that's hollow and not actual self-improvement.
And that is definitely Everett to a T, as far as a character goes. Because his journey in this is fascinating, because he's the one who's kind of, I would argue that he's the anchor of the movie, because it's really his story.
Oh,
and
sure.
he's taking the other two along for the ride under a false pretense, but it's still like his journey to get back to his wife and his children. But he's still really got a lot to learn, and I would argue that the movie even ends with him not really having learned a lot. Like, he's made an improvement, but he's still like at the place where he's like, he didn't find the right ring. Like,
well, I mean, like Ulysses, his greatest flaw, despite his semi-noble intentions, is arrogance.
Pride and glory.
He also seems like a character that maybe internalizes a lot of this stuff, because, I mean, you don't realize it until the first time you've watched the movie at the end, or middle-ish. His entire journey isn't just for money. He's trying to escape from prison, run all the way back for love. He's trying to get back to the woman he loves before she marries someone else. He doesn't want to see that happen. So that's a much more noble pursuit than money you would normally classify. But it goes against his character, and on a rewatch, you can actually kind of reframe it in your mind and think, oh, geez, this guy is actually longing for home the entire time. It's love, family, all noble things that he's after. But he doesn't make it seem like that. Internally, yes. Externally, no. That's never presented.
that's a good sleight of hand, I would say, where Clooney's character is built up as someone who's very comically stereotypical in his pursuit of the finer things. And like he talks about at one point, you know, having silk sheets and feather beds instead of like sleeping on rocks. And the truth of the matter is that he knows the entire time that there is no fortune, there is no treasure.
Right.
But his idea of what better living is that he's just after a normal life with his children and his family.
It's that kind of putting on airs. If you look at the logo for Dapper Dan, it's like a dude in a tuxedo with slicked back hair, whereas fop is just the giant word fop. Like, it doesn't even sound impressive, it's just fop. But Dapper Dan, though, it's got that sharp alliteration, it's got a handsome guy on the cover. In truth, though, if you have slicked back hair, it doesn't do anything for you when you're completely covered in mud and dirt and you haven't showered in like 4 months.
Look, before we get too far away from this scene, I just want to say that whenever my cousin first saw this movie and heard that hymn that the Baptists were singing, she thought it was so beautiful that she made it her ringtone on her phone for a decade. At no point realizing that the reason it was put in this movie is because it sounds really creepy.
I mean, that's honestly, every time I walk into church, I'm creeped out by the music, but everyone there apparently likes it. It's supposed to be beautiful.
This brought that hymn back.
Speaking of that scene, that's another kind of a vague allusion to the Odyssey. And that's Everett doesn't partake in the baptism, and that's much like Odysseus not taking part in the lotus eating when his crew comes across the lotus eaters. Kind of a different context and outcome, but
I never really thought of it that way. That is interesting.
Before this scene jumps past us, they're describing Satan, and of course Everett gives like the stereotypical version of Satan. And Tommy's like, oh no, sir. He actually describes him as, eventually we'll see the guy who's tracking them down. You know, was it sheriff or deputy? I can't.
He's the
sheriff. Guy I've seen this movie about 1,000 times, and naturally I remember none of the character names.
Sheriff Cooley.
Sheriff Cooley, thank you. Is essentially portrayed as Satan, and especially at the end of the movie, his lines make him seem like he's inhuman. So I think that's an interesting line here that, Tommy's talking about meeting the devil, and then later these characters will also essentially meet the personification of the devil, if not the actual devil.
Well, you don't get any more Southern mythology than the devil hanging around with his hound dog. Also, something very interesting that I stumbled onto when researching. Now, most people seem to assume that, the character of Tommy Johnson is meant to be a stand-in for the blues musician Robert Johnson, which I always assumed. You know, he's the guy who claimed to have sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads for his talent. In fact, there actually was a real blues musician in the 30s named Tommy Johnson, whose career predated Robert Johnson, and it was actually he who first had the soul-selling legend attributed to him, which was later mistakenly attributed to the more famous Robert Johnson.
It was Tommy's mother that told the story, wasn't it?
Yeah. I guess just because of the last name, just through cultural telephone game, it just became attributed to Robert Johnson.
Also, I love a movie that knows how to use Stephen Root.
Oh, yeah.
One last thing I want to say before we move totally past the Satan scene. To me, it's a great contrast because Tommy's talking about selling his soul to get music, like he's eternally damned. However, throughout the movie, there's a lot of points where music is actually their savior. Like right now, they sing the song that eventually at the end of the movie will grant them their pardon, will change their entire lives, essentially solve all of their issues. So music in the movie, I mean, actually saves them many times, even though Tommy essentially says he's damned because of music.
Well, I think that kind of plays into just the weird relationship America, especially the South, had with music back then. I mean, you look at, especially the way music from the black community was treated back then, where it was just automatically associated with sin. I mean, hell, the word juke means bad. That's where... So that they started calling the places where black music was played juke joints. So that's where that came from.
Well, I learned something horrible today.
So I think it's playing that as kind of, again, like with the Coen Brothers' obsession with duality. Like, I think they're kind of making a joke of that. Right? Yeah, it's presented as though music is coming from the devil when it's actually the salvation.
Mm-hmm. Besides that, too, the music does... It's not just their own salvation, it's other people. Like, the political campaigns are dependent on the music. That really carries them more so than their messages. In the end, it's not because they're members of the KKK that they're pushed out of office. It's because they stopped the Soggy-Bottom Boys from playing music that people rebel against them. They don't care what the message was, they just want the Soggy-Bottom Boys to play their song.
Well, you also have a history, especially in America, especially during the time period where this movie takes place, which is during the Great Depression, leading into the modern day, where America has a long history of demonizing specific genres of music and specific tastes that aren't really well known to them. And in a weird way, it's kind of almost a meta commentary, I would say, if I could attribute it to anything, where this is literally music coming from the devil, and it's widely accepted as something that everyone loves. Yet music that would later come about, like rock and roll, like punk, like heavy metal, stuff that is actually attributed to stuff that is actually considered controversial by a lot of people when it originated, was attributed to Satanism and the idea of, oh, that's the devil's music.
Pretty much. Also, I will never not be amused by albino Tim Blake Nelson.
Also, I just want to say Satan has the best music always.
Always.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he plays the hell out of that fiddle.
But going back to, like, the political stuff.
No one ever likes that.
I love how much of this movie is rooted in the culture of early 20th century populism. Especially Southern populism. Which is like one of the biggest and most bittersweet political movements in American history. Where you had a lot of people like your Pappy O'Daniels coming up and seeing the oppressed people, but specifically like the farm workers, and championing them and trying to, like, that was where you first got the I'm your best friend politicians. which continues to this day. But there was a very dark side of that, because sometimes the populist opinion is overwhelmingly wrong, and that's where we get the Ku Klux Klan being brought in. And you can kind of view all that whole struggle in this movie as like the conflict between positive populism and negative populism. And like you said, Cody, like in the end, it's positive populism that wins the day.
Which, yeah, if you look at all the complaints Homer Stokes brings up, they all seem more or less fair. Like, he is encouraging nepotism in his campaign. Like, most of the stuff Poppy does doesn't necessarily make you believe he is a great leader. But he still has to be better than the KKK guy, so, you know, you take the lesser of two evils.
But the KKK guy has a midget.
Little person.
They'll get an even smaller one. Also, the word little person didn't exist back then, Cody.
Yeah.
They had little and person. I don't know if they put it together.
Technology was not stumbled upon.
Look, political correctness did not exist in the 30s.
He's got us there.
There was the era where Superman was invented. Political correctness would not come about.
Just as a quick side note, because I just want to bring this up at some point in the commentary, my favorite story regarding the production of this movie, which is that Clooney, upon reading the script for the first time, sent it to his Uncle Jack, who lived in Kentucky, and had him read the entire script into a tape recorder, because he wanted to hear a Southern man do his character's lines. And because of that, Clooney did not realize until they were in the middle of filming that there was cursing in the movie. Because his uncle had just skipped over all those words.
That's a word that needs to come back into play.
I just like how Clooney was so method that he had someone else read a script for him just to hear a Southern man dialect.
That's Clooney's version of method acting. He put that Dapper Dan in his hair, and he had a countryman read the script.
You can still buy Dapper Dan. I just looked up on Amazon. It's like $20 for a can.
I'm surprised you don't own any.
I was going to buy some.
I knew
Cody's
honestly,
hair, not to offend your hair, but you seem to have very short hair most of the time, so I don't imagine it would do a lot for you.
I've been doing a new style where I shave one side and let the top grow out. It's like the cut every dude has now, apparently.
I also go for that cut, so I can't really say anything.
Yep.
Wow.
But I didn't know there was a difference between gels and pomades, so after doing some reading, apparently I've been going the wrong route. I should be a Dapper Dan man.
My entire life has been wrong up until this point.
I got a thicker curly hair, so I need a thicker, stronger paste.
We could take anything from this movie. It's that we should all be Dapper Dan men.
Here comes possibly
I thought I should be a soggy bottom boy.
Don't ever say that again.
Oh, jeez.
So here he comes.
Yeah, possibly my favorite character in the entire movie.
Even though he only has, 2 scenes?
That performance, though. I just love, because they're going through old American mythology, they have to meet a gangster.
Babyface Nelson.
Although, historically, Babyface had died several years before the start of this movie.
3 years before.
Whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
This does not take place in the South. This takes place in Fantasy South.
It's Mythology World. Mythology World has different rules.
Also, as the movie is very happy to remind you at every turn, it is a movie. That's something I come to really appreciate about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? As I said earlier, there's the 3 mythologies being represented: Greek, American, and film, the universal mythology. And this movie takes every opportunity it can to remind you that it's artificial, whether through anachronisms or something like the overwhelming sepia tone that they digitally added to the movie.
Well, the sepia tone was, I mean, I was reading up on this, and that largely came out of the fact that every location was green as hell, and it contrasted with their vision of what the movie looked like so badly that they had to digitally insert sepia tones just to make it look old-timey.
Well, I find this fascinating because Oh Brother, Where Art Thou has the esteemed position in movie history of being the first movie ever 100% digitally recolored. Like, there was this, and then like a year later, the Fellowship of the Ring came out and really brought this shit into the mainstream. And this all happened pretty much accidentally.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm still laughing at Not the Livestock, one of my favorite lines from the movie.
Oh, interesting fact about that cow getting hit is the Humane Society refused to put their mark on it because they thought that was a real cow. This is one of the few movies, they had to be showed the CGI effect. This is one of the few movies where instead of the standard no animals were hurt thing, it's the added word of simulation. Like, despite
actually
simulation is used.
Impressive, because it was 2000. The fact that they had a very passable CGI cow.
It looks real.
I never knew until I looked that up. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about the fact that the bullet holes were CG'd. Like, the entire thing was CG'd?
Wait, they run a cow over right after that, too.
Oh, yeah.
The bullet holes and the cow being run over, but specifically the cow being run over.
I would have just assumed puppet instead of a real cow, but like a really good puppet.
Yeah, I figured like it was some sort of animatronic.
Going back to James's point about the presentation of this super fantasy South, it's always really struck me how much the environments stand out in the Coen Brothers movie. Because, like, when people think of the Midwest now, they think of Fargo. For years, it's been Don't You Know Fargo-type characters. And that makes a certain amount of sense because they are from, like, the Minneapolis area. From Minnesota. They should know that area, be able to portray it in a very strong way that's different from how everyone else is kind of slaps on screen. It's more interesting when you look at their movies set in other locations that you wouldn't think they'd be as familiar with. Like the South. To me, this is a very extremely Southern movie, but I've never been to the South. I don't know what the South is like, besides like hearsay and weird stories and cultural osmosis. So my version of the South...
below the Bible Belt.
That's true. That's why I put the hearsay in there.
Cross promotion.
So my version of the South is essentially the Coen Brothers version of the South. It's the super sepia tone, kind of sweaty, a lot of dirt roads, for some reason still the Depression South. So I don't know if they portrayed a realistic South in any way, or something that strikes true to someone who lives in the South. But to me, this seems, oh yeah, that's the South. If I had to describe the South, I'd just describe Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, or Raising Arizona.
Well, the Coen Brothers South is a South that exists, but only as an idea. It's the South that people in and out of the actual states kind of carry around with them. And kind of in the same way America just carries the Old West around with it, despite the fact that it never truly existed. And in that weird way, like, it does exist. Because, I mean, if an idea in your head... It lives on in
your dreams!
Well, if an idea in your head is strong enough, especially an idea of a place, then at a certain point that influences you, and like a little piece of that idea becomes tangible in the real world.
Or if you look long enough, I mean, eventually everyone who experienced the real 1930s will be dead. And the only way to recollect it will be from their memories and what was written down and all that passed on knowledge. So what we remember might as well be as good as the truth. Well, because at a certain point, there's no one left to actually refute it or say, no, I was clearly here, it was different. Here, see my memories.
Well, belief shapes the world in a very real way. So by that standard, mythology is real. It may not be factual, but it is tangible in a certain way.
Oh. Would you allow me to wax about how mythology works for a moment?
Yes.
Like, we've been waiting the entire
It was the
commentary.
lead up, man. We were
Yeah.
giving you miles of feed here. Come on.
Work with us.
Well, going back to what you were saying, James, look at the Old West, and specifically look at the shootout at the OK Corral. That shootout.
I can picture.
I am going a place with this, I swear to God.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so that shootout, that was one of the worst shootouts in the actual Old West. One of the highest, like, body count killings in one place. And if you actually look at the real event, it wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. Like, especially compared to any old Western, where people die every 5 damn seconds. But that was one of the worst of the worst. And then, like, think of that, and think of what we did with the Old West there. Even with the way we mythologized the shootout at the OK Corral, it's bigger, it has this whole thing around it, blah, blah, blah. The OK Corral became the Old West entirely. Then, like, examine Nordic or German or Irish mythology. The mythology of the land, where anything from the beginning stages of that region become this long, storied mythology. The same way works America. America isn't that old, so our mythology doesn't date back that long. It's the Old West, it's the South. Real places that currently exist that aren't just, if you look at, like, Britain or whatever, like, pieces of mythology that surround there, structures that are just found that we, the mysterious clues to their origin they don't understand, so stories are built around it. We have the Alamo. We built it, it had a purpose, we know why it's special, and it's become mythic around that reality. The South as a land is mythological to the United States. The shitty parts of it, the glory of it, the goddamn heat of it. And part of that, the way that works, part of that stems from America's own dark history and how it was all born. Our mythology, American mythology, rides right up our ass into the present. Because it works as a warm blanket to kind of bear the brunt of being reminded slavery was a thing, that mass genocide was a thing, that we stole land, blah, blah, blah.
That we put people in internment camps and did all this, like, horrible stuff that a lot of people tend to want to gloss over or forget.
Exactly. So that way we have the Old West, we have the Old South, we have the 1950s. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is an amazing representation of how American mythology works. Because it's an idealized version of the mythical the South. It has the KKK appear in all their terrifying glory, but, they're also epic beasts to be slayed that are come across, and they're grand galactic wizard, or whatever the fuck he calls himself.
It's transformed into a joke,
Yeah, exactly.
Like they sing their song and they have a cross burning, but it's almost presented in a slapstick, silly way instead of the terrifying way it is in reality.
I would say that it's slapstick only in the way that they're presented as villains, and villains always get their comeuppance. And when you see them first introduced, it's very much not a laughing matter. Yeah. It's portrayed serious as hell, and something that is very clearly disturbing to the three men, despite the fact that they're Southerners. They're from Mississippi. I mean, this sort of thing stereotypically would be attributed to the South as a whole, as opposed to just select parts of it.
But if you look at the way they're set up, it's terrifying, but it's in this structured way that you'd expect an old story mythology to play it out. With their marching around, with the song playing, all of this.
And they're literally presented to you as the guards from the Wizard of Oz.
Yes. And it's because mythology often meets reality. Half of Greek mythology is political propaganda, or attempting to explain horrors the current minds can't comprehend. That's half of religion, honestly. It also softens the blow and allows myth creating to create a blind spot for the present, or at least the near past. Like, look at the Bible or Greek myth or Roman myth, etc. Most everything there was created to explain shit that happened 24 hours earlier. So, like, while utilizing the Odyssey in very broad strokes, through that cultural osmosis, instead of creating an interesting alternate version of that story, what I like is, like the siren scene here. Like, it's just the sirens, it doesn't really have a ton to do with the version that's actually in the Odyssey, but it creates something new. It creates a whole new modern myth that is very American and very Southern, and it's utilizing the tropes of the myth.
And I also love how brilliant it is just as a concept that, to even the movie's logic, is almost alien and surreal. Because, yeah, they restructure it by explaining that, no, they just wanted to turn in the three men to the sheriff, but this scene is still very surreal and
very
just
otherworldly.
Yeah. It's very almost out of place in a way, but it's perfectly in keeping with the rules of the universe. And it almost is, I would say, it's the personification scene of what James was talking about earlier, which is this movie reminding you that it's a movie.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the most out there part of it for me.
So I'm so glad you brought up the Old West there and the gunfight at the OK Corral. You made a very good point there, by the way.
Gold Star!
Also, hi, Sindel.
That feeds into like what I was saying earlier, the idea of myth in its own way becoming real by being believed. Look at how much the myth of the Old West affects American culture to this day in a very real and sometimes troubling way. We wouldn't have modern gun culture if it weren't for the very tangible fantasy world of the Old West that's drilled into the head of every American from birth. The idea of this freedom and this land that's ready to be conquered if only you had a revolver.
Oh yeah, this amazing landscape where America was just being built and just on the verge of becoming a concept, and metropolitan cities didn't exist, even though it was the 1800s. Like, just weird, abstract ideas of almost like the Middle Ages, like the idea of land, a faraway place where the actual rules of what society was during the time period don't actually apply.
Yeah, the idea of the land as a blank slate that you can just make in your own image, rather than having anything forced upon you. And it's stuff like that that makes me bristle whenever I see people who are very dismissive of art and mythology and storytelling and deride that stuff as just entertainment or as just fantasy and don't feel as though there's any responsibility in storytelling. Because I think there is a very much a difference between good myth and bad myth. Because, like as I said, stories and the way they are told affect the real, tangible world in a very big way, eventually.
Yeah.
I would like to jump on that, but I have a feeling someone wants to mention the fact that there's frog people.
This is going to happen to you one day.
They turned him into a hornet toad.
My favorite line of the entire movie.
That is a fantastic line. But again, another Odyssey reference.
Actually, before we get actually too far away from the sirens, one little interesting Odyssey note, though, is that the sirens don't actually appear as they do in the Odyssey. It's actually a combination of the sirens and when Odysseus comes across Nausicaa, who's washing clothes.
The Valley of the Wind?
A different one.
Oh, there's more than one?
Yes. But she's washing clothes with her handmaidens in a river. So it's... Unfortunately, George Clooney didn't run out of the woods naked like Odysseus does in the story, but Would we have liked
Just
to have
imagine.
seen that?
Their box office, instead of being like $70 million, would have just been through the roof.
The tagline would have been George Clooney, butt-ass naked.
At last.
Buy your tickets now.
It beats Titanic in 3 days.
But I wanted to jump back. Unless you had more to say about the Sirens, Mike, I wanted to jump back about the idea of good and bad myth.
Go on.
Clarence on that? Okay. So, the title of the film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, as far as I can tell, is pulled from the movie Sullivan's Travels.
Yes.
If you haven't seen that movie, which it sounds like everyone here has, so good job, gold stars all around. We're educated, in a way. It's about a movie star who wants to make a movie called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, about suffering in the Great Depression. So he decides to kind of do a method acting thing where he'll go out and pretend to be one of them. But during the start of the movie, like, there's a cavalcade following him, and it's pretty make-believey. Like, he's not actually living life their way, he just thinks he is. And to me, that's kind of a representation of a bad myth. It's someone misunderstanding it, but assuming they know it. Like, oh, I experienced this once, I completely understand your situation.
Yeah.
They're buying into a mythic portrayal without any sort of positive rooting. They're just using it to confirm their own beliefs, or just hand-wave away stuff they don't like, or are not interested in.
Yeah, and we see that, like, reversed with the end of Sullivan's Travels, which is just that guy realizing that, oh, poor people don't want to see movies about how sad it is to be poor. They just want something to alleviate their sadness.
Poor people
And
actually
that's
know it
beautiful.
sucks to be sad. Oh, weird.
It's like, they would rather just watch Bugs Bunny and laugh and be elevated instead of being drugged down into the dirt again. Just the kind of thing you can only learn from actually experiencing another person's life.
Which is it really connects back to a point you made earlier about the quality of maybe, I keep saying low art because that's like the only good term I have for it, which is kind of insulting. But pure entertainment, like, not necessarily that it's bad, it's just, it has different merits, or it could be used more as escapism. So, even though it's not culturally appropriate as high art, it really is important and meaningful.
Yeah, well, I feel that Coen Brothers are definitely obsessed with Sullivan's Travels as a concept. Because you look at Barton Fink, which is essentially their version of that movie. With somebody
It just ends with a head in a box.
Yes. Well, it's Sullivan's Travels taken to a nightmarish conclusion. Like, I want to tell the story of the common man, and that means befriending a serial killer.
Before the moment passes, John Goodman. Where is John Goodman?
Once again, another archetype of the American South. The con man.
Best grunt.
John
Bigger
Goodman,
than life con man.
the lucky charm of the Coen Brothers, apparently.
He is gonna show us the fucking life of the mind.
We're out of our element. Truly, we are all out of our element.
Before we totally abandon Sullivan's Travels, and this is something that I have, like, no real proof of whatsoever, but just the titles being so similar, Sullivan's Travels and Gulliver's Travels, it feels like some inspiration almost has to be taken just from the title, but the fact that they are both movies about journeys, and more or less comedies.
Yeah.
I mean, Gulliver's Travels is more of a fantasy slapstick, whereas Sullivan's Travels, it's certainly got dramatic elements to it, but it's more of a slapstick farce. And I feel like all of that has filtered into the Coens. So we get a version that's trying to reconcile those things, where you have a fantasy mixed with slapstick, mixed with dramatic. You shove them all together and put them in a blender and end up with Everett's Travels. Which somehow becomes about a Greek myth instead of an Irish story.
Well, you also have the telescoping nature of the title, which is taken from Sullivan's Travels. But the movie Sullivan is trying to make, called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, is based on a fictional book that exists in that universe.
Right.
So you have the title for this fake thing taken from a fake title in a movie taken from a fake book that exists in that movie. So it's telescoping fakeness, telescoping myth. It's a myth and a myth and a myth and a myth, just like this movie.
Mythception.
Didn't the Coens even say, like, they envisioned this movie as what Sullivan would have made after Sullivan's Travel's finished, more or less. Like, this is
I can see that.
what they imagine O Brother Where Art Thou to be. I want that to be MB's new ringtone.
Wait, which part?
Earn money. It's all about the money, boys. Small detail I also love, the corn flying out of George Clooney's mouth when he's smacked by that tree branch.
I just love how this is a movie where we see Tim Blake Nelson attempt to fight John Goodman as George Clooney watches bemused, not realizing that he's going to be beat up on the head by a log.
George Clooney in this movie gives zero shits about his compatriots until the end of the film, which is part of his arc. He does learn something, because in the start of the movie, when they all hop on the train, he immediately starts asking about getting his chains cut off, even though the other guys can't get on the train. Like, John Turturro's not even close to getting on. He doesn't try and help him anyway.
Well, I also love how that's just kind of a signaling of the fact that Clooney is just as dumb and dim-witted as the other two.
Oh, very much.
He just has a better vocabulary.
Again, it's the appearance of sophistication rather than the actual substance of it.
Oh, yeah.
And foreshadowing, you've seen the end of Big Ben, or Big, one of these days I'll remember character names. The Cyclops.
Big Dan.
Big Dan. I don't know why I said, Teague. The Teague threw me off. Which, of course, later on in the movie, they very much do see the end of Big
Dan Teague.
Big Dan Teague. Teague.
I just want to
I
talk
have to say it
about.
like that always to remember.
I just want to talk about the Cyclops for a moment.
You
Yes,
always
I'm just
wanna
calling
talk
him the
about
Cyclops.
Good. Let's go with the Cyclops.
I legitimately would like to see John Goodman play a Cyclops in like a Sword and Sandals movie. I think that'd be fascinating.
The role of a lifetime.
Yeah.
I thought you just meant you wanted to see him play Scott Summers.
Jane!
He is thin enough to do that now. So Teague is Polyphemus, who's usually, I think Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon too? Yes, he's the son of Poseidon.
Yeah. That was one I knew.
Hey! Now, once again, like a lot of the Odyssey references in the movie, there's not really a ton more to it beyond he has one eye, and he does not obey the rules of hospitality.
And he uses a club.
And he's killed by a burning log. Well,
Well,
I mean, not actually killed in the actual Odyssey, but his eyes poked out by a burning
his eyes
log.
poked out.
Plus, the guys sneak into, or try and sneak past him dressed up as clan members, which is pretty close to
The sheep.
the sheepskins. It's white.
I mean, it counts. It's white. If only John Goodman, though, went up and petted them to make sure that they were okay. You feel white, boy.
Oh boy.
But the rules of hospitality. This was a very big deal in the Greek world. Like, Zeus smited people left and right for not obeying this shit. He was actually the word. Essentially, this is what Zeus presided over, which is hospitality for guests.
He was the god of good manners.
I thought it was
Essentially.
lightning, but that's okay too.
Well, Zeus had
Lightning and good manners.
Also, I love how he's a huge, gigantic hypocrite in that manner. Because, holy crap, Zeus's bedside manner was...
It's his in-bed manner you want to take care of.
Oh. If you want to hear more about that. I don't know, because the podcast is never done. I'm trying to guilt you into finishing the podcast.
Hey, we're working on it.
An episode will be recorded soon. But that's actually, like, one of the biggest tie-ins between the Odyssey and the movie, which is hospitality and being a good host. Because pretty much everybody, like, the three guys encounter tend to fall into good host or bad host, which is most Greek stories, but also particularly the structure of the Odyssey. Because there was nothing worse in the Greek world than being a bad host to guests.
God, who was the name of the dude whose whole thing was that he, like, ran a Greek bed and breakfast and crushed people in their beds?
Oh yeah, like he put people in, like if they were tall, they put them in a short bed and he cut off their legs until they fit, and if they were short, he put them in a long bed and stretched them.
who was killed by Theseus, and Theseus cut off his head and still stretched him, even though that completely defeated the purpose, because Theseus was an idiot.
Theseus
But
was
an
just
epic
insane.
idiot. Yeah.
We went over this. He was the Punisher of the old world.
Listen to Hercules versus the podcast.
Cross promotion.
Yeah,
I'm
that
just
dude
gonna
was like a literal serial killer in Greek mythology.
I'm assuming his name was like Hercules or something very clearly like this guy's an asshole. Do
Well, you know
not
what? I
stay
would
at
hope it's
cottage.
more clever than Hercules.
Dick Wadulus?
Yes, I like that a lot. That's canon now. I don't know what it's canon for, to be honest with you, but it's canon. It is motherfucking canon.
By the way, I just
want
want
to
to
change my
say,
Steam name now. Dick Wadulus on Steam.
I just want to say, this is 100% accurate to how these rallies would go in the 1930s.
To be fair,
Right
it's
down to
accurate
the
to how they go
brooms.
now.
Brooms were a big part of old Southern politics. You were not a politician unless you had a broom in your hand.
I mean, can we really say that this is any different from Hillary or Donald Trump rally now? I mean, there is a lot more shootings, granted, but...
Well, Trump does sweep the floor with his hair.
Ugh. So on a non-political note, on a technical level, I love the construction of how they have all the threads coming together. It's pretty rare you just cut to a place and something happens and then you cut to a completely unrelated place. It does happen, but there's a lot of spots where you'll see characters having a conversation and they'll walk by another character who is part of the story having a completely separate journey, more or less. And in the end, they'll all come together finally and resolve each other's stories. But it's like a great Pulp Fiction-y kind of way of just transferring from spot to spot without feeling choppy. It makes it all seem like it's connected and meticulous.
Yeah, this movie does a great job of essentially being a series of vignettes, but never feeling like it's just a disconnected slog. Like, it still feels like a very cohesive narrative, and that each scene plays off of the one before it.
Right. Like, if they didn't film it that way, it'd be very easy to be annoyed by all the politics scenes, because they just wouldn't seem like they have any connection in the movie until the very end when they finally bump into each other. Which just seem weak. Like, who cares about this guy? Why have we been developing him for 40 minutes? But the way the movie does it, you actually get these characters bumping into each other, just barely missing each other, so there has to be some relation there that's going to eventually emerge. And bona-fide.
God, these are the best child actors ever.
I love the weird dichotomy. I love the weird dichotomy that Clooney's daughters have with him, where they're there to point out the fact that he's a no-good son of a gun.
They still hug him.
Goddamn paterfamilias.
And then at the end, he leads them all by a string.
Hey, you don't want to lose any kids, do you?
The one on the left grew up to be Scarlett Johansson. One on the right grew up to be Ryan Gosling.
I'm assuming you're talking about the people playing instruments.
Sure, Cody. Sure.
Yeah, Mike, that's less silly in the world of that joke.
Well, they're old already.
And this actress
They're Benjamin Buttoning.
This actress grew up to be Holly Hunter. Oh, wait.
I don't see any piss jars.
The greatest use of Holly Hunter in any movie.
So how...
I feel like she was just made in a jar to be in this movie as this character. That's what her entire career built towards.
So as someone from the North, I probably don't have a great ear for Southern accents. How, James, do you feel about the Southern accents used in this film?
These, for the most part, I would say, are mythological accents. See, there's something very fascinating about... Sorry, this scene always destroys me.
It is
that dude looks like Robert Crumb just being psyched out by George Clooney.
He still puts up a good fight.
But there's kind of a weird thing with the Southern accents that most actors put on, whether they're doing period pieces or not. And that's that most actors are inclined to do a specific type of Southern accent that has not existed since like the early 40s. That's where you get stuff like Kevin Spacey on House of Cards with his Southern dandy accent.
Yeah. I've always wondered about that thing.
And that's just because those actors watch old movies made from that period. They watch shit like A Streetcar Named Desire, and they think that that's just how people talk. When actually that whole rhythm of speaking went out with the early 20th century. So it's kind of a weird position where I can't really say that any of this is best movie fight scene of all time.
I love how confused George Clooney looks in this fight, just bamboozled, and a little head shakes.
He's getting flashbacks to Batman and Robin. He still thinks he's in that rubber suit.
I can turn my head.
Arms.
Or my head.
But yeah, I can't really say that this is inaccurate. But no, there's not a single Southern person alive who talks like any of these characters.
There's no one who does that. And you stay out of Woolworths.
God, this movie has the best extras.
The Coens are always amazing at picking just fantastic, memorable, weirdo people for one line. According to my internet research, this is the part where they go to Hades. Is that true, Mike? Did the internet lead me astray?
That is correct.
Also, I find, this is completely unrelated to the movie, but I find the fact that this speech is coming out of George Clooney's mouth at this time when he was widely known to be Hollywood's most eligible bachelor to be endlessly hilarious. It's like, is that why he didn't get married for like a decade? Because he just bought into the hype.
He bought into the Dapper Dan.
I wish Clooney just rocked that mustache in real life, though.
It's a good look for him.
What I find interesting about this scene is, you have the Hades parallel, and also this is just the ending of Sullivan's Travels, with the chain gang just watching a movie in a darkened theater. And once again, that just reinforces the thing I love about this film, just the three different languages being spoken. The language of myth, the language of America, and the language of old movies. George Clooney covering his face will never not be hilarious, by the way.
Or his really dramatic turn around and cough at the ground when the prisoner transport drives by. Like, that's convincing.
His dramatic hanky work.
Yes. Top notch. Speaking of top notch, this is something I didn't know about Clooney until today when I was watching the features on the Blu-ray. He does an amazingly weird and good Popeye impression. Like, he was talking about comparing, like, Popeye to this movie, and he goes into, I can't do it, but he can, and it's amazing. Like, if they finally get around to making that Popeye movie Jendy Tartakovsky wants to make, just put him in.
God, could you imagine the trailer to that? With George Clooney as Popeye.
Popeye the Sailor.
I just love the idea of him being the successor to the role made famous by Robin Williams.
They could also get John Goodman to play Pluto.
They could. And Holly Hunter to play Olive Oil.
On a serious note, the world really does need more Tim Blake Nelson and John Turturro. If those guys could be in more things, I'd be very happy.
Specifically, the world needs more Tim Blake Nelson as the leader, because that was a ball that was seriously dropped.
That was a thread that was set up. I know they don't really like to acknowledge the Incredible Hulk, but come on.
You promised us Tim Blake Nelson as a supervillain. Please give it to us.
Right.
They did that twice. He was foreshadowing Mole Man.
Tim Blake Nelson is always so close to being a supervillain.
I'm going to set the record straight here. As far as Fantastic Four goes, he is not set up to be the Mole Man.
None of us actually saw the movie, so I guess we don't know.
God, the waste of Tim Blake Nelson in that movie just annoys me, because Tim Blake Nelson is one of the most underrated actors in Hollywood.
He makes everything so adorable.
And what was... I'm trying to think of recent stuff Totoro's been in, and it's like
Just the Transformers.
Sad.
Which is weird. How did he get stuck to that wagon? Besides the money.
Well, John Turturro is kind of crazy.
I think, actually, now that I remember it, I think he's starring in the new HBO miniseries, The Night of.
Yeah, I think so. Also, stole my story.
Oh, God, yeah. I tried really hard to forget about that movie.
I was just trying. I'm just another excuse to bring that up every episode.
Stole my story.
Speaking of weirdo John Turturro stuff, am I the only one who's seen Romance and Cigarettes?
Yes.
That is the jukebox musical written and directed by John Turturro. If you watch Barton Fink, the script for Romance and Cigarettes is what he's typing on the typewriter.
Oh.
Because he multitasked. It's one of the worst movies ever made. If you've ever seen the YouTube clip of Christopher Walken singing Delilah, that's what that's from.
Ah.
And there's also a scene where he sings Red-Headed Woman by Bruce Springsteen. And this movie was supposed to be an art film. I could never look at John Turturro the same way again, knowing that that's what's inside of him, and that was the one movie he made.
See, I'm just remembering now, I saw a story a couple weeks ago where he said he wants to make his own movie about the character Jesus from The Big Lebowski.
I am all for that.
And he said he should have the rights because he created that character with the Coens, so they don't actually own the character. I don't know if that would hold up in a court of law.
I don't think the Coens saying he can't do that.
I think he said the Coens were fine with it. It's just he has to find other people that are going to finance something like that and make sure he doesn't get sued for taking a Big Lebowski character and making it his own.
Well, that's the thing is, like, considering that character belongs to that movie, which belongs to a studio, wouldn't that technically violate some sort of copyright?
But well, it depends. If the Coen Brothers wrote the movie, like, on spec or something, they could maybe... I don't even know what deals with that, because they wrote, produced, and directed it. So they probably own a giant chunk of that film in some way or another. I don't know if that gives them the right to just dole out characters.
Seems like a complicated
we're talking around the fact that the Jesus is a pedophile, so that's what that movie would be.
Right, I don't know how you make that into a movie. Like, that's a wacky character you can only stand, like, 5 minutes of in a film. But I'm fascinated, like, just...
If we Get Up to the Greek, we can get a fucking Jesus movie.
Well, we can start the grassroots campaign right now on this podcast, on this Bop in a Movie.
Send your money to John Turturro at...
No. Send it to us, and then we'll give it to John Turturro at an appropriate time when we deem fit.
Look, we will find John Turturro wandering the streets of Hollywood.
I will find him! I am actually going to Hollywood in like 10 days. If you can send me your money really fast, people, I can possibly make this dream come true.
And we will update the episode if and when Cody meets up with John Turturro. And he might even say a few words.
While I'm out there, I'm not going to meet John Turturro, but I'll bump into Edward James Olmos, and I'll get in a fight over Wolfen.
Please ask him if he was the Wolfen. Because I still haven't gotten a response.
Yeah, we sent him...
keep sending that tweet.
We sent him a tweet. This is no joke, and this has nothing to do with
this. It was in an episode.
We sent him the tweet. If he's the Wolfen. He's yet to respond.
And you know what that tells me? He's an asshole who doesn't answer his fans.
No, you know what that tells me is that...
go back in his archives and answer old tweets.
No, that tells me is that he's afraid of doling out the truth about who the Wolfen really is.
He is not allowed to give out that information.
You couldn't even give us an answer, like a wishy-washy, well, that's your interpretation. Like, nothing.
Look, I don't think Edward James Olmos likes being reminded that he was in that movie.
I can't blame him. I really can't blame him.
God damn it, Gaff.
He did a man's work, Cody.
By being in Wolfen? I don't know if that's... I don't know what kind of work that is.
I like how, as we're talking about Wolfen, this is the scene where the clan shows up.
Appropriate.
Also, I appreciate the fact that they didn't want to do blackface, but they still covered them in mud so they'd be mistaken as black. Which somehow completely skirted any sort of, like, racial criticism.
Well, I mean, George Clooney is bronze for the majority of this movie, so it's not that much of a stretch.
True. Of how dainty their dancing is.
They're really well choreographed.
It's,
It is totally the Wizard of Oz.
yeah, there's that too. It was also reminding me of, like, If This Is the History of the World Part 2.
Jews in space?
A little bit.
In space. The sad thing is, this is pretty, like, this has to be the Klan's favorite movie. Because this is, like, the one time they're actually presented the way the Klan actually thinks it is.
Instead of just a bunch of nerds. Just white
like people who
nerds.
Racism nerds.
Yes.
People who can't cut holes in flour bags.
I mean, he's literally called a wizard.
They do that in real life, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Grand Celestial Cyclops.
A
It would've been
dragon
amazing.
wizard. It's all over.
I just realized how amazing it would have been if this was the scene where they discovered that Totoro's character wasn't a toad, because earlier in the movie, Tim
Yep.
Blake Nelson says, we have to find a wizard to turn him back.
It would have been great if they switched roles and, like, Tommy was the one they found earlier. And he was the one being held captive, but it wouldn't make any sense. Like, why is the KKK just murdering John Turturro?
He knows what he did.
Well, they do mistake them for black men, so.
They don't quite know what John Turturro is. And that vexes them and scares them.
Well, he is just the weird Totoro wrench that directors use whenever they need a dude with ethnic ambiguity. This movie, he's Latino. This movie, he's Israeli. This movie, he's from Mars.
Hope he's in a sporting event and he can use that as his nickname on his jersey. The Totoro wrench.
In this movie, he's insultingly Jewish. By the way, I just want to talk just a minute about the weird-ass fashion of the Ku Klux Klan, which has always been one of the worst designed uniforms of any organization that has ever existed. Like, there's no shortage of bad things you could say about the Ku Klux Klan, but these are really absurd costumes.
They are.
They don't look comfortable at all, either.
No, and, like, white is terrible. It's like, you're gonna have to bleach that constantly.
White is terrible. I mean that as a race thing.
And just, what is the point with the masks?
I mean, I don't think you can see out of those things.
No, I'm very sure Quentin Tarantino was pointing out a factual observation when all those guys are just crashing into each other running around in his film.
That's what always gets me whenever I see the mask is the eye holes are always so far apart.
It's almost like every member of the KKK is so stupid they don't know how to make eye holes into their own masks.
Believable.
Wait, the Klansmen are stupid, Mike?
It's
It's my insightful commentary for this Oh Brother commentary. The KKK is stupid.
So can somebody please intercut this with that scene from Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay? We got us some Mexicans!
I thought you were at first going to go with the opening of Bad Boys 2.
I thought this was when we were finally going to get, like, a Trump joke.
I love how Goodman's just has one hole.
Right. Even though he's...
It's like he's
He
the
has his
Klan
patch
version.
off.
It's like he's the Klan version of Deathstroke.
Never understand why he takes his patch off and then only has one eye hole.
Right.
Like, oh, this is when I can finally take it off.
Saw the milky eye.
Milky eye.
I like how he can still smell the money on them. That Dapper Dan.
They desecrated a burning cross.
How silent movie, John Goodman.
The look
Also, Klansmen gasp.
Klansmen murmur. The midget.
Hey, Odin Quincat.
Love that. Who made them the color god? Everything that guy says is amazing, even if it's horrible.
Klansman yelling.
Shit, lots of it.
I'm just obsessed with the fact that John Goodman in this movie is enough of a pillar of the community to be part of the Ku Klux Klan.
Do you guys think that when Peter Jackson saw this movie, he decided to include it in The Return of the King? When Dogmoth, stares down that giant rock that's coming at him and doesn't move till the last second, it's basically filmed the same as John Goodman catching that giant spike.
He kind of is.
I wouldn't put it past him, because there's a couple of moments Jackson has taken from other films that just basically repeated. Army of Darkness and The Two Towers.
Oh, yeah.
He's not shameful about it, and they're entertaining scenes. It's just, he's definitely lifting from other spots.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, the movie that immediately followed this in terms of making color correction a movie standard was The Return of the King. I mean, the Fellowship of the Ring. Every single shot in that movie is color corrected insanely, and that was, this may have been the first to do it, but that was the one that really made it standard. And now we live in an age where every movie is color corrected.
That does weird me out that there's that little of a time difference between those two, because, Fellowship was 2003?
No, Fellowship was 2001, I want to say.
I think
Yeah,
it was-
2001.
Oh, man.
2001.
And then just a few years later, every movie would be blue.
Blue and orange and green, if it was a horror movie.
Blue, orange, green, or if you're Zack Snyder, muddy brown. Because Superman.
Remember, you guys saw that video, right, where someone took Man of Steel and added color to it? And it was like, it's beautiful.
So beautiful.
That frustrates me so much because the modern way that color correction is used in mediocre films, or even good films that are a little misguided, is always to either make the color uniform or detract from the natural color of the movie.
Yeah.
The way Peter Jackson used it in the Lord of the Rings trilogy was to enhance the colors to make the movie colorful in an otherworldly way.
Oh, yeah.
And in this movie, it's used just to correct the color palette, to give it a more colorful sepia look. It's meant to add life to a movie rather than take it away.
And, I mean, in this case, it's Roger Deakins filming it, so even if they didn't color correct it, it would be absolutely stunning. But most films don't have a Roger Deakins to fall back on, so instead of trying to put it all in the color correction, maybe they should just plan out how to make a better movie.
Well, that's the thing. Color correction is used in place of actually composing the film well.
Yeah.
It's used in the place of composition and actual color composition.
Yeah, you can add production value by making it look a certain color. Instead of actually composing it in a certain way.
Which is very, very strange when you see films like Dracula Untold be one uniform color, which is just this murky gray, or something like Book of Eli. And Book of Eli I didn't even really hate. It's just, why does it all have, especially when it's dystopian, why does it all have to look like everything is just bleached to infinitum?
Well, I mean,
It's going to really suck in 10 years when you go back to watch movies, because you realize, this looks so dated. Also, I want to point out that the subtitles just called this Adventurous Folk Music.
Adventurous Folk Music, a new album by George Clooney.
About all that gambling, stealing, and robbing.
By the way, that song that they're singing right now is the only instance of the actors actually singing, because Tim Blake Nelson is belting this out.
Tim Blake Nelson has a beautiful goddamn voice.
He does.
Well, go back to the color correction. As I was saying earlier, the thing that amazes me about that is the Coen Brothers stumbled pretty much ass backwards into that by pure accident, because they did everything they could to color correct this movie through natural means, whether it was set dressing or just doing manual color correction on the actual film negatives.
Bypass
Their
stuff.
their absolute last resort was doing it digitally. And that change, like, that last minute decision changed movie history.
It's the nice thing about the Coens. They have a really good luck at just having happy accidents happen. They're just willing to kind of roll with things, and beyond improvisation by the actors and stuff, it's if an idea strikes them at a certain point in post, they'll just run with it. Which is good. I mean, you don't always have to stick to a plan, but you shouldn't not have a plan either.
They seem very experimental.
I remember there's a story about Fargo where one of the characters was just sitting around scribbling on a notepad, and they got all excited, so they just pulled the camera over and told him to keep doing what he was doing. And one of the actors is screwing around in his spare time, just doodling on paper to pass the time, and they were like, no, that's got to be in the movie now. So
That eventually led to that dick in The Big Lebowski.
Probably. Out of curiosity, have you guys gotten a chance to see Hail Caesar?
Not yet, but it is well on my list.
Same.
I picked it up because it was on sale at Best Buy, and I'm not sure where to place it in my Coen ranking. It's strange because everyone kind of breaks them down as like, oh, lesser and greater. I don't know if that's fair, because even their crappy movies are normally way better than most other stuff, with the exception of like The Lady Killers. So I don't know, Hail Caesar was not my favorite by any stretch of theirs, but I could still see a lot of redeeming aspects to it. Maybe it's one of those where I just have to watch it many times. Because, I mean, Big Lebowski still gets funnier every single time I watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Same with Raising Arizona. That one is great the first time. It's fantastic the third time. It just keeps going.
Oh, as I was saying to MB earlier today, I would rank Oh Brother, Where Art Thou as my favorite Coen Brothers movie if it weren't for the fact that Raising Arizona is one of the very few truly perfect films ever made.
I definitely love those two, no doubt. They're up there. But I am very, very, very partial to Inside Llewellyn Davis.
It is very strange to think that, there's a recent Coen Brothers movie I still haven't seen.
Yeah, I didn't see it in theaters, and I was so mad.
Everyone forgot about Inside Llewellyn Davis. Like, that dropped off of the face of the earth quick.
Oh, that I did get to see. Well, they did a weird release with that one. It didn't get like a nationwide thing. They kind of rolled it out over a very long period of time. Whereas Hail Caesar actually got like a full-fledged release, and just nobody saw it.
Hail Caesar was being brought out as a big deal, but just everyone was indifferent.
Well, I think also the thing with Inside Llewellyn Davis is that its main star shot up like a rocket immediately with a role that came out right after that with Oscar Isaac being in, what was that movie with the robots?
Ex
Machina.
Ex Machina, just completely overshadowing that with his performance, and then Star Wars.
There's a decent gap between those. I mean, he was in a lot of different smaller stuff. Like, he was in the Robin Hood with Ridley Scott. He was in several things.
Yeah, Inside Llewellyn Davis was the movie where everyone first noticed Oscar Isaac.
Right, yeah. They put him on the map, and then Ex Machina came out, which probably did better than Inside Llewellyn Davis money-wise. And that, I think, really got him started on a lot of critical paths. Obviously, you've got Star Wars and the new X-Men movie to really push him into the limelight.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying, is like, he was shot up into the stratosphere.
Well, I've noticed with Coen Brothers movies, regardless of the quality of each individual movie, like, you have your big Coen Brothers movies that take America by storm, like No Country for Old Men. And then you just have the ones that slip under the radar, where it's as if the Coen Brothers are able to slip into an alternate dimension where there's still little-known indie directors. Where you get stuff like Inside Llewellyn Davis or A Serious Man. Also, this is the greatest sequence in movie history.
It's so vivid. I'm not sure if it's possibly an homage to The Bride of Frankenstein. Is it Bride or Frankenstein? In one of those, they do the same thing. They throw the monster up on the pole.
God, I know that we don't want to really bring the commentary down with politics, but I really wish this was how the Trump campaign ended.
They just bring in the
Bernie Sanders is up there singing Soggy-Bottomiest songs. He is the man of constant sorrow. Wait.
No, it's still
okay.
Clooney.
If Bernie Sanders is the one singing, that would make Hillary Clinton.
As long as Trump is ridden out on a rail, that's all I get.
That's all
After
you
being
want.
revealed as a Klansman.
I'm revealed as a Klansman. You mean he's not already?
I just want to see Hillary Clinton wearing pants like Pappy, like all the way up to the shoulders with suspenders, because it'd be the funniest thing in life.
Going back to deep cover Coens, I still think that's one of their greatest accomplishments, and like one of their greatest strengths as directors is they've never gotten too big.
Yeah, even their big successful movies normally aren't all that successful. No Country for Old Men, despite being the big Oscar winner, I don't think really made all that much money.
No,
Like, during its initial run, I don't think it really broke the bank or anything.
Yeah, the Coens, like, they've never let any of that go to their head to the point where they ever felt like they only had to make big movies or only had to make, like, crowd pleasers. Because, like, you don't get a more alienating movie than A Serious Man.
Yeah.
Like, that was made for them, not for anyone else.
Well, the same is true of Inside Llewyn Davis. Like, that is not a crowd-pleasing movie. Oscar Isaac is just a complete asshole in that film. But it's still a great film. It's just not one made to endear to most audiences.
Well, that's what I find fascinating as an outsider to Coen Brothers as just the famous directors that they are, is just that ultimately they're one of the few directors, just them as a unit, that kind of dictate their own path. Like, they don't really do studio work. They do Coen Brothers work. They do their own films. And it doesn't really matter, like, what it is that generally there's a quality to them.
Oh yeah, even whenever they make absolute garbage occasionally, it's their garbage. So you can't even really get mad at it. It's like, they fucked up, but they fucked up their way, so God bless them for that.
I would even argue against that. I really, besides the Lady Killers, like most of their stuff I'm pretty into. Even Intolerable Cruelty. I will die on this hill.
What about Burn After Reading, Cody?
I saw Burn After Reading in theaters, and it was one of the greatest theater experiences I've ever had. The crowd, there was a very small crowd, and it was weird because it was on a giant screen. Like, there must have been nothing that came out that weekend. So they played it on the mega screen. And the few people that were there, we were all totally into it on the same wavelength as the movie, just laughing at the funny parts and just having a great time. Like, I love Burn After Reading just for that movie experience. Plus, it's got Richard Jenkins, so that's always fun. And Brad Pitt gets shot in the fucking face, and it makes me laugh every time I think about it. So yes, Burn After Reading, I think, is actually pretty good.
Well, the entire podcast is called into question now because Cody's the host, and he just said that.
Yeah, I was waiting for Mike to just...
You might as well just cancel the entire fucking show. Because there's no... I'm taking it off iTunes. I'm taking it off iTunes the second this movie's over.
Good.
It's gone. You can't find it there anymore, folks. Cody ruined it.
Fine. I'm going to go watch Burn After Reading.
Oh, I'm very sorry for you.
Why? Go laugh at J.K. Simmons' antics.
That's why the Spider-Man movies exist, Cody.
That's why those
That's why he's getting
insurance commercials exist.
Did you guys not laugh at the dildo machine in Burn After Reading? Answer me seriously. You didn't laugh when it was revealed? Is you is or is you ain't my constituency?
I've never been happier that you live near a frog sanctuary.
I love how over the course of this commentary has become a Coen Brothers movie.
It really has.
It's all led to the downfall by Cody.
I'm the
And the frog saved us.
Hudsucker Proxy, I will say, another one that is never mentioned enough. That movie.
Oh, Hudsucker Proxy is delightful.
Oh, yeah.
The team up between the Coen brothers and Sam Raimi.
Yeah, now they're back on my side.
The victorious return.
God, I wish we executed criminals this jauntily today.
The angry mob, their pitchfork or torches.
I would be so happy if I was executed this way.
March through town.
It's either this or the Cersei method.
Imagine they put this scene into Public Enemies. Like, instead of Johnny Depp getting shot at the end of that movie, they are walking him down the road and everyone's playing violins.
That would have made that better.
I like that movie too.
I actually...
It's not a contest.
I'm gonna air out all the crappy movies I enjoy, and you're just gonna have to deal with my horrible opinions.
Hold on. I don't even dislike Public Enemies. Like, it's okay. I mostly enjoyed it. I hate the look of the film, and it kills it for me.
I think, the look is... The whole aesthetic of the handheld digital camera is a complete mistake, but
Break
trying something different.
By the way, I just want to say, my favorite thing about that scene, the relative of that cow he shot being dragged out to witness.
It's like Jaws the Revenge. That cow knew.
Also, this could very easily be such a movie-breaking thing, with them defying the 3-act structure here, with our dual ending.
It is, it's a little epilogue deal, but it really has the emotional ending to it that you need.
I like how it just feels like the ending to an old book.
Yeah.
Because you look at mythology, especially probably like the most famous example being like Beowulf. Like, mythology and old tales are rife with double endings. Like, that was back whenever the epilogue was considered its own act.
It totally makes me think of back to Return of the King, like the actual book when they return to the Shire and it's been ransacked by Sauron's forces, and they have to, like, another action sequence of them taking the Shire. So you just read 1,000 pages, you think it's done, like, no, hold on, we have another set piece for you to go through.
Saruman the Many-Colored and his rainbow cloak.
It was so much that even Peter Jackson looked at it and he's like, nah, I've got enough. I really don't need more action. This is plenty. Going back to our idea of memory, I like that line about the happy little tire swing, and then they pan over to reveal nooses in their place.
Oh, speaking of mythology, this isn't the last place I can really wax poetically about mythology, and I'm going to do it.
Take it.
Take it to the hoop, Mike.
Because what I love
at the rim.
Nothing but net.
Basketball. Because what I love, what I love about what I'm about to go into is I don't even know if it was intentional at all, but it's my excuse to talk about a story from Greek mythology, so accept it.
You have, just go for it.
So, the whole retrieving of the ring thing is kind of an analogy for the bed test from the Odyssey, where Penelope, to prove Odysseus is who he says he is, orders Eurycleia, to a servant of theirs, for anybody listening at home, to move the bed from their chambers, and Odysseus, who built the bed, speaks up that it's impossible because of the way it's built from a tree, and blah, 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 and they get back together because you realize it's actually him. But, to me, the most interesting connection between Greek myth and the movie also involves that ring. Once again, I still don't know if the Coen Brothers actually meant this, or I'm just seeing Greek mythology where it's not.
You do have Greek mythology vision.
They did make an environment, too, where you're apt to point this out. Like, even if it's not intentional, I think they want us to find connections.
I will always find a hole.
Crazy.
So, the whole aftermath of this sequence where Penny says, it's not hers, and the real one is at the bottom of the river, and we need to go fetch it, blah, 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 calls it an impossible task. So, in an episode of Hercules versus the Podcast,
cross promotion,
ding, I told the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. But just for pacing to kind of get us to the Minotaur a little bit quicker, I actually left a story out. And it's one that takes place while Theseus is on the ship traveling to Crete, where he will take on the Minotaur. And while on the ship, King Minos of Crete gets handsy with one of the maidens from Athens that's supposed to be sacrificed. And, being all heroic and shit, though actually a psychopath, Theseus steps in, saying that he is the son of a god of Poseidon, who is the villain of the Odyssey, and Minos should not challenge him on these grounds and back the fuck off. Minos, though, is a son of Zeus, and not particularly intimidated because, Zeus, Poseidon. And nor does Minos actually believe Theseus on this, since he's already the son of the king of Athens, and he's now saying he's the son of Poseidon. If you didn't have listened to that episode, Theseus is the son of both because Greek myth didn't understand science. So anyway, to prove it, Minos takes off one of his rings and throws it overboard into the sea, saying that if Theseus is the true son of Poseidon, that he would have no problem completing this impossible task. But, since Theseus is the son of Poseidon, he jumps in and manages to get the ring.
He communicates with the fish telepathically.
Kind of. He actually also comes up with a crown of jewels.
He looks suspiciously like Jason Momoa.
But the crown of jewels was given to by Poseidon's wife, Amphitrite, to help him out while he was down there. There was a whole palace scene, but I'm not getting into that.
Wait, was Atlantis literally brought in?
No, not Atlantis. Atlantis came way later. But same basic diff. But Poseidon, he lived in the water a lot of the time. Now, once again, I don't know if I'm just connecting dots that aren't there. That seems like a very stark reference to a little piece of the story of Theseus.
It would not surprise me if something like that was stuck in the Coens' heads just through osmosis.
I mean, it does seem to be a pretty direct correlation. I mean, where else would it have come from, really?
Yeah, ring at the bottom of the sea, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And if not,
it says it's an impossible task. I mean, Clooney literally says that.
Exactly.
True.
And if not, I just got to tell a story of Greek mythology that has nothing to do with what we're saying, and that's a good excuse.
And it was supplementary material for Theseus and the Minotaur, Episode 2, Labor 2 of Hercules vs. the Podcast. Listen now on iTunes and Stitcher.
It's a little, multimedia experience there. Next we'll release a game with another story about Theseus.
You have to connect the dots yourself.
Riddle of the Minotaur.
Pretty soon, they're just going to replace me as host of this podcast with Theseus. They're gonna find a Theseus.
Cody, stop campaigning to be replaced as host. You're host of Box Office Pulp forever. I'm sorry.
You're stuck on this podcast you created.
Why? Why me, God? Why? So, the movie, spoilers, is wrapping up at the moment. Do we have any final thoughts we want to throw out about maybe the Coens or this film itself in the closing seconds of the film?
I'll start just because I'm the one who saw it most recently and have the freshest perspective on it, which is that, honestly, this movie does a lot of things that surprised me and really threw me off in terms of just how to present a story and how to do a comedy specifically and do just an outlandish tale like this. So I have to say, this has really spurned my interest in going out and seeking more of the Coen Brothers filmography out, just for myself. Even though I've always been kind of interested in their stuff anyway, just because they're legends, in terms of filmmaking. So,
Good.
yeah, this movie definitely pushed me in the right direction.
I'll say, as someone who has been imprisoned in the South all of his life, and is also very much obsessed with mythology and storytelling, this movie has always been such a profound gift to me. Both in the way that it's able to combine disparate archetypes and symbols from so many different mythologies into something cohesive, which is something I'm very obsessed with. Just the way that it touches on something that has always both befuddled and fascinated me, which is, as I said earlier, the idea of the American myth and the romance and seduction of that, and the difference between embracing a myth as an ideal and embracing it falsely as a fact, which is very easy to do. And I feel like more so than any movie tackling similar material, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is able to embody what is good about the American myth and what has sustained it. It's bona fide.
I don't know if anybody else can tag up on that.
Nah, I got shit.
Well, I'm glad James and I got to list our thoughts on the movie.
Good work, boys. So as these credits roll, I'm going to remind our listeners out there, if the cross-promotion wasn't enough, we had several other fine podcasts you should check out. There's obviously Hercules vs. the Podcast, which if you're watching this and you already have an interest in mythology, you can listen to Mike talk about mythology for, I'm going to say, a good 9 hours.
And, of course, we have another show where Mike and I delve into Tales of the Unaccountable with Pulp Nightmare, coming at you whenever we feel like it on iTunes. Kind of show. And yeah, it is. It is definitely that kind of show. In fact, I suggest maybe not listening to it if you're for the faint of heart.
Cross promotion.
That is the best advertisement for a podcast. You shouldn't listen to it. What is it? Is it mysterious? Is it a little too sexy? No, it's just us talking.
Out.
But still.
And coming to you every month from the Pulp Podcast Network are 2 shows on the subject of comic books. There's graphic novelism, where
yes. Oh.
where Mike, MB, and I, when we're not being interrupted, talk about a wide variety of subjects relating to the comic book medium. And there is Supergirl Power Hour, where me and my friend Corey McCreary talk about old superhero comics and recoil in horror at the evils of Superman.
And I can't believe we missed this one. I mean, considering all about the South. Below the Bible Belt. Did I blank out?
Below the Bible Belt exists.
And you should listen to it on iTunes and Stitcher.
Currently on hiatus, but it will be returning this fall with gusto.
There's a giant backlog. You can work your way through it in time. On a final note, before you have your also, which is going to ruin my final note thing, if you could go on iTunes, leave us a couple of stars. That's nice. We know you're listening. Otherwise, we have to go to your house and shake you until you admit that you watched us, and that's just annoying for everyone. Or you can go to our Facebook page, leave some comments that I'll probably ignore. Just a little bit of feedback. Be nice.
Yes, please. If you have listened this far and are a fan of the show, please tell us in some way. Because right now it is radio silence.
And remember to subscribe on iTunes and or Stitcher.
Also, you can find graphic novelism specifically on Twitter at graphic novelism.
And Supergirl Power Hour at S-Girl Power Hour.
Box Office Pulp will be on Twitter soon.
Oh, God.
Old Nightmare, maybe, but again, it's one of those things where I don't know if you should seek out the podcast.
It's Hearst.
It is Hearst. It is Hearst.
What kind of weird carnival show are you pulling off here? You don't want to look in the mystery box, or do you?
Reverse psychology, Cody.
Oh, I know those words.
Reverse promotion.
Can someone pronounce ting backwards? It's hard because there's a G and an N. Promotion. Can someone do the Twin Peaks,
Brothers from Ocean.
Thank you very much for listening, folks. That's a wrap.
Get out of here, you bums.
Damn, we're in a tight spot.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
Still can't masturbate wrong.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.
There are a lot of issues that plague the comic book community at large that are really never kind of addressed. I think what the three of us really wanted to do was do a show where we explore all of that.
And by the very hand of Odin himself, we now have the seed of this podcast.
Marvel's Odin.
Does DC have an Odin? They must.
I don't think so. Let's go with, Image Odin.
Look, DC has Hercules, so he has to have something.
Who doesn't have Hercules? Spawn?
He has Angela, who's, Lady Hercules.
Yeah, she is kind of Hercules-like. Can we still legally say Spawn has Angela? Have I just gotten us in trouble?
Well, now that she's Asgardian, I think it's fair play, so...
Hey, she's not technically Asgardian.
Yeah, but she's Asgard's assassin.
And she has, a weird new haircut. Have you seen Angela's new redesign?
Look, we can get all into the pathos of Angela on another episode.
That was just a little taste of graphic novelism.
We've already got the perfect sound clip. We just have to dig it up.
I mean, it's in the recording.
It's in an edit point between the claps, or what should have been claps. You can hold up your end.
The edit point is going to be in there.
I don't know
if
how
you listen for the claps, then you don't have to listen to the crap in the middle.
Cody, what version of the Earth do you live on?
I don't know if we have time for him to answer that.
Just look, okay, when you open up whatever program you're editing audio with, you always see the representation of the audio spikes. During the claps, you can just stop and stop. You don't have to listen to the crap in the middle. You save so much time.